And it's another great day in Concord, California, brought to you by COVID-19. Yes, we're recording this from my home studio, as usual, and we'll be doing that for foreseeable future. So, meanwhile, we have important things to talk about, namely symbols. But before we do that, let's go ahead and talk about next week. Next week, we're going to have an interview, our first interview on this channel, and we'll be talking to Jonathan Chao, who is a UI UX design lead for Acuity Brands. It should be quite interesting. We'll be looking at a project from perspective of a user experience designer, and we'll try to understand what it takes to take the project from a napkin sketch or feedback all the way to production project. We'll be talking about common pitfalls, the issues that tend to arise between developers and designers, how to avoid them, and also how to present it properly to the end client for approval and for feedback. So definitely look forward to seeing you there next week. Meanwhile, let's get back to symbols. Symbols are a great way to take the component and reuse it throughout your application. There are methods to building symbols. If they're followed correctly, symbols become more usable and more useful as well. You can start very small and very simple and take it to any complexity that you feel comfortable with. Let's go ahead and take a look at what it takes to create a symbol. We'll look at visual symbol, we'll look at Dataflow, or otherwise known as logical symbol, how to and where to use it, and how to set it up and make it configurable. So let's go over to the controls and we'll pick up from there. Okay, we're back at the controls here, and let's first take a look at where the symbols are and how you can make them. First, we're going to talk about visual symbols, and then we'll get into the Dataflow symbols. Okay, so first of all, visual symbols. If you have any, you will find them in the Symbols tab next to your outline here, and then you can use them to drag onto your page. The symbols that are added to the project library will be available on the bottom. For example, here, these are all symbols, and then when you drag them out, you can see that the symbol path points to the page and the project where this particular library symbol is located. Okay, but we're jumping ahead a little bit, so we're going to backtrack and we're going to look at what it takes to create a symbol. First, we're going to make some content, which later will make a symbol. So we'll start by inserting a text, right? And it's called button. Now, I could go and make this a symbol right away. So convert to symbol, call it button, and there we go. Now we have a symbol called button, and we can start using it immediately. Now the symbol has no properties that we can configure. It has really no configurability at all. It just says button. We can get into edit the symbol by double clicking, or right click edit will do as well. But here's the problem. So we made text indicator into a symbol, but right now, let's say I decide that I also want an icon to be displayed next to my text. Well, I no longer have a container to put it in, right? I can't really put anything inside this stage because this is just an edit stage. It's not part of the symbol. And my symbol starts at text. So if I try to add anything else, I don't know, let's draw a rectangle, right? It's inside the symbol stage, but should I try to exit and get back in, it's not there anymore, right? Because again, my text is my symbol root, and I cannot place anything inside text. So what would be the proper way to create this button symbol in order to keep it open for future enhancements? Well, in that case, I would start with a group, like so. Maybe make the group horizontal and center aligned. Give it some gaps there, and then well, let me delete these guys so they don't confuse us. And this is our group, and I'm going to insert a text into the group. Call this text button, and now I'll make this whole group into a symbol. Again, I can do right click on the stage, I can do right click in the outline and do convert to symbol, and we'll call the symbol button 2. Okay, so now if we go into the symbol and take a look, now I have a group into which I can add more stuff. So again, if we try to add maybe a little button in there, so there it is. Let me just make it visible, give it some background, and make it a little bit more round, and add some gap in between the text and the button. There we go. So now this is this symbol has a lot more potential because I can make it do more stuff, and if need comes later, I can modify it by adding more features, more components inside. Okay, cool. So we're that far. We know how to create a visual symbol. We know where to find it after you create it. Next, we should probably take a look at how to make it useful. Okay, so to make it useful, it needs to do something, right? Or be configurable in some way. So currently it just says button and it has a green dot. And if my project happened to call for something that said button and had a green dot, this will be perfect for me. However, it is likely that my project will call for a button with some other label, and maybe for the color indicator here to be changeable based on some condition. So let's see what it takes to make symbol configurable. So I'm going to go in to edit the symbol. Again, I'm going to double click. When you do that, you will edit symbol in context, meaning that it will remain on your stage, in context of your stage, and any values that symbol properties may have will get carried into the edit mode. The alternative to this way of editing the symbol is editing that from a symbols panel here by right clicking and selecting edit. This opens the symbol completely out of context. You see that it's actually a separate stage that gets opened. It knows nothing about the page where it's located. There's no data coming into any of its properties, if it has any. So this is where you would edit the symbol in its pristine condition. So basically completely out of context. And sometimes that's very useful. In our case, we'll just do it in context. And you will, as you use it more, you'll find that editing symbol in context is usually what you need. Okay, so we need ability to control something in this symbol. So that starts with symbol properties. You will find them under Modify, Edit Properties when you're editing a symbol. There we are. We have no properties at the moment, and we need some. So let's start with the actual text value. So that's going to be a string. I'm going to drag the string here and just call it label. Okay. And then let's say we want a color property to control this dot. So this is going to be a fill property. Called dot color. And maybe a boolean that controls whether to show the dot or not at all. So show dot, like so. Okay, so this lets our symbol take some data in and output that as if needed as well. So those will all be inputs, meaning that you will supply these values that symbol has to read and do something with. And let's add, we can add something like an event, for example, dot click. So let's say you want a specific event when the user clicks this dot. right? So I'm going to change the mouse cursor, and I'm going to find the on-click action of the dot and just bind it to the dot click. And I'm going to make this a read-only. Read-only means that the symbol will output a value on this property, but it will never accept a value from the user to be passed into the symbol. And this is an event, so symbol will always pass it out. Okay, so label. Now label needs to go into our text. So color needs to go into the dot fill. And finally, show dot needs to go into the display, like so. Okay, cool. But notice the problem. The problem is that all these values have no initial values, so it shows up rather useless. Yeah, our symbol needs some default values. Otherwise, every time you drag it out, it'll look like, well, nothing. So how do we set default values on symbol properties? So let's get back into the symbol and open the symbol properties again. And this is how you set the default values. Anything you type in or set in the property while editing the symbol will get serialized with a symbol as a default value. Meaning that when I type it in, right, and maybe toggle a boolean and set a color, and then save the symbol, every time I use that symbol, those values will be in symbol properties. There will be default values. Notice they're not shown here, right? So you only see them when you edit the symbol. And the rule is this: if the value input is null, meaning as a user I'm not passing any value into the symbol, it will use the default value saved in the symbol. In this case, you see that this label property that I created is null. I'm not passing any label into my symbol right now. The empty dot here means there's no value. That means that it will use this default value that was typed into the property when the symbol was created, so when it was being edited. Right? Now, let's look at another scenario. Let's pass a value into this. Let's call it button A. And now let's go and edit this in context. And this is where the word in context starts making sense. If I look at symbol properties, it has the value button A, the same value that I passed into this symbol instance. However, you have to understand that this value is not serialized. So unless I touch it here, so if I don't type anything in here, right, just keep it what it is and save the symbol, right, this value does not get saved into the symbol, right? All the other instances of the symbol will still have the original value that was typed in when I last edited this symbol. So how do you know? So this is where sometimes it's useful to be able to edit the symbol completely out of context, because this way you'll see exactly what the default values are, because on your page you may have things that were being passed into the symbol, right? And you may not be very sure what's the default value and what's being passed in. So looking at it at the symbol out of context will tell you that. So if I right click edit and I look at my symbol properties, I see that I have a word label in there. That's my default value, right? That is saved, serialized into the symbol. And every symbol instance that I use that does not have anything passed into it in that property will use this value label as the default value. Okay, hopefully that was clear. So let's go ahead and close that. Okay, well, so we have a symbol that we can control label. We can control the dot, right? Show hide. We can control dot color, like so. And now this becomes quite more useful compared to what it was. Now I can use it in my project. I can create multiple instances of it, right? I can duplicate it. I can drag versions of it out, right? And of course I can set the label and the color and whatever else, either hard code it as I need to or connect logic to it. So to have a color be driven by a condition, for example. So that's it. That's what it takes to create a visual symbol. It can be of any complexity and it can be used within a repeater. Now I know we have covered repeater prior to this lesson, but let's take a look at how symbol plays in the context of a repeater when it comes to properties, symbol properties. So notice when you use a symbol instance as is, right, all of its properties are listed right next to the symbol property. So you have a symbol path, and then all the properties that symbol has get rendered here in the property inspector right below the symbol here. Now what about a repeater? So let's take a look at the repeater. So I'm going to create a group. We need a basic data set, so I'm just going to drag out a table with default values in there. Let's do this vertical layout. I'm going to use these default values, and I'm going to use our button 2 symbol, like so. Okay, so our repeater has rendered 3 items because our table has 3 rows. That's fine. So what about properties? So if you expand the repeater, you will see a render item in your outline. A render is basically a prototype of whatever symbol you're repeating. There, all the symbol properties are listed, so you have access to them. But keep in mind, this set of properties refers to all the instances. In this case, I have 3 copies or instances of a symbol because I have 3 rows, but I only have 1 set of properties, right? So if I actually type something in there or link something to it, it will get passed to all 3 instances. Button B, like so, right? This is not, well, in some cases that's useful. So when you set in a style property, for example, it will apply to all copies or all instances that repeater is generating. However, to have individual row be applied to individual item, right, then we use the method we've reviewed in the repeater lesson, and we open the table that's driving the repeater, go to the renderer, pick the property that we want to control. And in this case, let me, these values are not relevant, so let's do this. Let's do true. Oops. I'm just going to put some values in our table that make sense for us. True, false, true. And we'll call it button A, button B, and button C. Okay, so now this data is slightly more relevant to what we're doing. So again, we'll open this table. And if I bind the whole column, right, not individual cell, right, because if I bind individual cell, it'll be the same as typing it in. It'll get passed, this same value will get passed to all the instances. However, if I bind the whole column, then each row will get bound respectively, right? So now each instance of my symbol gets a value from a corresponding cell, right? Same goes for other properties, of course, like so. That's it. That's all there is to it, to a visual symbol. And like I mentioned, it can be extremely complex and large or very small, right? The whole page can be a symbol, right, with everything inside, or a tiny little component, like in this case, just a piece of text and a little shape. So It's completely up to your requirements and preferred methods of architecting your page when you decide just how big and complex you want to make your symbol. But now you have the tools to do that. Okay, now we get into Dataflow symbols, otherwise known as logical symbols. Now the concept is extremely similar to the visual symbols, but of course they have no visual portion. They just execute logic. So let's explore this a bit. To create a Dataflow symbol, of course, you have to be in the Dataflow. To find the symbols you have created, you would have to be in the Symbols tab in your Dataflow. By default, any symbols you create on this page will be kept with this page symbols. However, symbols can be also project level symbols. So any symbols created in project Dataflow, which can be found here, modify project Dataflow. So any symbols created in this Dataflow will be project level symbols and will be available everywhere on every page under Symbols tab under Current Project. Right? So if you're trying to create a symbol that you want to reuse on multiple pages, don't make it a symbol on every page, make it a project symbol, and then you'll be able to use it on every page where you need it. Okay? So in our case, we'll keep the symbols local, so just relevant to this page. And let's create a basic symbol. Now the premise is the same. You need something to turn into a symbol. Right? So there are two ways you can go about this. You can build the whole chunk of logic and then turn everything into a symbol. Or you can start with some very basic block, like string variable, right click, convert to a symbol. Let's call this symbol convert status, and we'll build a symbol that will take a status word and output a color instead, like so. So I created a symbol. If you look under symbols, you can now see my symbol here. And by the way, you can create symbol hierarchies by using the dot in the symbol name. So if I rename this and do, for example, utilities dot, right? Then I get a folder and a symbol inside a folder. And I can have a symbol named utilities, and then this symbol will be nested under another symbol. So you can create navigatable hierarchies, which makes it a little bit easier to arrange your symbols. You can, by the way, you can do the same with your visual symbols as well. The method works the same. Anyway, so I have a symbol that does absolutely nothing at the moment, has no properties, has no logic inside other than that string block. So I'm going to go into edit the symbol. Oops, I renamed it, but this one is still pointing to the old name. So I'm going to delete this guy and drag it out again. Up. There we go. Now this is pointing to the correct name. So I'm going to right click, edit symbol. This is our string. So I'm going to be passing in a word and passing out a fill color. So going to edit symbol properties. Now for Dataflow symbols, the way you get to properties is not via modify like you do in visual symbols, but you simply, when editing your symbol, simply right click anywhere in empty stage and select symbol properties, like so. So there we go. And here we're gonna need a string. This will be, as a matter of fact, let's do this. Rather than allowing for any string input, which we obviously cannot account for with enough colors, we're going to use enum. So we're going to use a list input, where a user can only pick one of the predefined values. And then we're going to add a fill. So we're going to call this status in and status color out. Like so. So to define values allowed. I'm going to be right-clicking here and listing, comma, separated values. So let's do alarm, warning, down, and normal, like so. Right, so now I get a selection, a drop down. I'm gonna pick one of them, even though it's already saying alarm. In reality, the value is null. It just shows you the first one when the value is null. But I want there to be a value in any instance of a symbol, so that there's never a null. So I'm going to actually select something other than the first value, and then I can go back to the first value. Now this filled dot means this property has a value, and just like in a visual symbol, because I touched this property in here while editing the symbol, I actually set this property, it will get saved with the symbol as the default value. Right, and status color. So that's going to come from my logic, so I'm not going to set it to anything yet. So I'm going to create a very simple logic. I'm going to use a case block. I don't need this string block that I used to create this symbol in the first place. So I'm going to pass the status into my case and do a quick case. So if then warning, then down and normal. I'm going to add 4 color blocks. Like so. All right, so our alarm will be red, warning will be yellow, down will be gray, and normal will be green. And just bind them into conditions here. And else, I'll keep else as null. And this will go to the status color. And I'm also going to make this a read-only, because so user is not able to bind to it when he uses the symbol, because the symbol is using this to output a value, not to read a value. Okay, so done, right? So now notice that these properties don't get pinned to the block automatically, at least not on the symbol that you already had there, but any new instances of that you drag out will have those properties already pinned. However, they all have them in the property inspector. It's just they don't get pinned automatically. Anyway, so there. So we have a block, and if it works correctly, if we've done it right, it should change color based on status input. So we still have the visual symbol we created from a prior exercise. So now we can bind, well, let me just copy the symbol from here, go into data flow of this button of this symbol, paste it there, and do the binding. Done. Right, and just like that, we now have a Dataflow symbol that does something. I mean, it's a rather simple one, but it is a true symbol. It works in conjunction with our visual symbol by converting the worded status to the color status. Now, technically, this logic could have been just added to our visual symbol in the Dataflow somewhere, and didn't really need this Dataflow symbol to exist. However, it's still there, it still works, and it shows you how to create your own Dataflow symbol that does something you actually do need. That's it.